Hi, I'm Herne, and this is Daily Writing Advice. Working backwards is a fantastic hack that authors can exploit to write some great stories. So, readers have only one real way to process a novel, and that is beginning at the start and ending at the end. Sure, they might skip around or whatever if they're weird or they want to spoil it for themselves, but generally it's A to Z. They move forward. Authors can cheat. Authors can reach the end of a book, realize that they left out some important foreshadowing, and just go back in and add it. Simple. I've done it plenty of times, and it's a really good mindset to consider. This idea of working backwards. Not just in the sense of patching up the fact that your character's eyes were green at the end and they were blue at the beginning and you need to work backwards and change that, but more in a more macro-scaled, strategic sense of structuring your story this way. So, for me personally, I often start with the end in the mind. I start with what I want the story to feel like at the end, what I want the emotional experience of the reader having finished my book, or what I want my characters to end up like, who I want them to become at the end. Because once you know the emotional experience you want them to have at the finish, you can know how you need to position them at the start. So, a couple of quick ways that you can use this work backwards mentality with your own writing. Characters. Who does the character become at the end? What is their personality at the end? Once you've got that in your mind, how can you make them different at the start? Because someone who is brave at the end of your novel and brave at the beginning of your novel is probably not that interesting. Someone who's brave at the end of your novel and cowardly at the start of your novel, now there's an arc. There is some interest. There is some character development. So consider that with your own writing. Who do the characters become at the end? How can you work back to the start to make them the polar opposite or just really far from that? Plot. What is the outcome of your story? What is the kind of result of things? Where do things end up? How can you get them to start in a place that is as far from that as possible? Not necessarily geographically in the sense of I'm going to start my beginning 5,000 miles away, but more in the sense of expectations. Because once you know the end, you can kind of work backwards to figure out ways to make that ending unexpected by setting up things in the beginning. And this isn't just necessarily saying you should be super gimmicky and change the genre halfway through or whatever, but it's worthwhile thinking about how you can work backwards to seed in some foreshadowing to enable plot twists to happen in the end, or to enable revelations to happen in the end. And then lastly with theme. Because a lot of the times when I write something, I don't really know what it's about until I finished it. And that doesn't mean finish the whole thing. It just normally means finish the first draft or the second draft. But once you have that nailed down, I find it really useful to write down the theme. Actually write it down on, I usually have a one-page story guiding principle sheet that I make, sometimes before, sometimes after the first draft. And once you kind of have written that first draft and you know what your story's about, that's such a valuable asset because now you can go back and just tweak things so that they align more with that theme, so that you can explore that theme in greater depth. So, work backwards, make awesome stories. I've been Herne, and I'll see you next time. Go tell some extraordinary stories. See ya.